Hello and welcome to Soberanía, the Mexican Politics Podcast. I'm your co-host, José Granados, Ceja, Mexican journalist living and working here in Mexico City. I'm a presenter on Sin Muros on Mexico's Canal 11. And as always, I am joined by my co-host, Kurt Hackbarth, who is very, very busy. My goodness.
I'm a busy little beaver. It's holiday season.
This is a busy time for Matanga
And we
Editorial.
also have a workshop, so we're getting all the stuff out. We've got agendas, we got planners, we've got libretas, we've got all that stuff. And, it also is a very nice benefit having a workshop because, for guests, everybody gets a planner. Everybody gets a notebook. That's it.
Yeah. Hey,
we're not, that's it. Everybody gets what we already made.
They're very nice notebooks.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I don't think there's time to send people in the US, but if you're in Mexico, I think you can still squeeze in an order if I'm not mistaken.
You probably could.
There you go.
Probably could.
And, get them in fast because this poor guy's been working way too hard over these last few days.
Not that we don't have anything else to do.
No, not at all.
All right, I'll finish this later.
All right. Thank you for squeezing in some time here for our podcast. Of course, this is Soberanía, the Mexican Politics Podcast. I want to throw up our fundraiser on the screen. Support Soberania's anti-imperialist reporting out of the studio and into the streets.
Yes.
We are running this holiday fundraiser on GoFundMe. The link will be in the description. But we thought we'd mention that at the very beginning because it is the holiday season.
It's the holiday season.
And it's our last episode of the year.
It is. We almost never take time off, as you know. So we've got 2 holiday weeks here. We'll also be off from Canal 11.
Yep.
And don't worry, we're going to have some excellent content for you. If you didn't have a chance to see the live stream, the excellent top 10 stories of Mexican politics in 2025 live stream with our special guest, Samuel, then you can watch that. The first part will be the following Wednesday, and then the Wednesday after that. Dubbed and with subtitles, if you didn't want to slog through the English the first time around.
Yeah. And with slightly improved audio.
Slightly improved audio, a little bit of reverb there.
We're working on it. It's one of the projects for 2026.
It's like some of the, leaving some of the best reruns behind, but they're not reruns because it's brand new material. We taped it. We had a great time with Samuel.
It was really fun.
And we really ran through yet another event for Year in Mexican Politics. And it's not just, no es nada más para decir, but Mexican politics is never boring. There was a lot to talk about. There's a lot we couldn't even get to.
Exactly.
We had to kind of compress the analysis into only 2 hours. So if you want to take it in 1 hour segments, the following Wednesday and the Wednesday after that, and then you'll be well primed for us to get right back into the saddle in 2026. Meanwhile, if you can donate to the fundraiser, we would very much appreciate it. We would like to get, and if you saw today during the when we were doing the live stream of Jose Luis adjusting here and moving there and trying to adjust the audio on the fly.
And Googling how to reduce reverb. Yeah.
We would like to hire an assistant producer to help us with this stuff. So we're not saddled with all of the production stuff while we're also trying to do the content. And also a community manager to help us get the clips out, to get the news out about Mexico, to improve our reach, to make sure that this kind of anti-imperialist voice gets to the people it needs to get to. If you do it all, then you get tired. We're at the end of the year, we're tired because we're doing the content, but we're also doing the clips, and we're also doing this, and we're also doing that, and we're also doing the production, and it's a lot. So we'd like to hire a couple people to come on the team, really kind of get the ship into shape. And also, as we mentioned last week, to get some equipment so that we can go out and do more field work and go out of the studio and into the streets.
Hell yeah.
We've got some exciting ideas for things we want to do in 2026. And we have some great Taller interviews coming up with some very interesting names.
Yep.
So all of that.
So we didn't have one for this month, though.
Yeah.
But we did have the live with Samuel, so
Yeah.
you still got a guest appearance.
Still got it. It's hard to kind of pin some of these people down. Some of these high flyers, they'll say, yeah, of course. And then 2 hours before the show is set to go, they're like, oh, can't today.
Nope, guest can't. Nope.
And maybe they'll cancel. They'll do that like 2 or 3 times. And you're like, dah! So anyway.
That's why we need a producer. So they can deal with this headache.
Again, if you donated in the Juneburi, do not feel obligated to donate again, unless you feel that your means allow you to do that. But if you didn't donate in June and like to throw something our way in the GoFundMe, it would be really great to get us really off and running in 2026. So thank you again very much. Sound like Bartles and James, but am I dating myself with the Bartles and James commercials? But thank you for your support.
Yes.
Okay.
We have so much planned for you in 2026. So we promise we're going to deliver you more and better content. Yeah. But let's get to the show.
Let's go to the show.
One last show for 2025. Soberanía number 89. These are the topics for today. Mexico's tariff package. This was the big piece of news today here in Mexico, announced on Monday's Mañanera.
Yeah.
And it's been a long-running discussion here in Mexico about sort of balancing
on this program,
and in the comments.
We've had it out, and we will continue to have it out.
We'll get into it in just a minute. Then we'll be talking about fentanyl being declared a weapon of mass destruction. What does that mean for the relationship with the United States? Yeah. Because, it's a little bit tricky to trust the United States in this moment right now, given how they've weaponized some of these previous declarations to basically impose a blockade, declare war on Venezuela. We want to use our third segment to talk a little bit about what we're looking ahead to in 2026, and a little bit of another pitch for our fundraiser, because this is something we really need in order for us to be able to do some of the things what we're thinking about doing for next year. And of course, losers and haters. Yeah. And we are picking on the New York Times again. They make it easy. We actually try to look for things that are in the Times.
It's funny. There's all roads and losers and haters lead to the New York Times, and their coverage has been bad, and it's gotten worse.
It's gotten worse for sure. Yeah. Yep, I'll agree with that sentiment.
Weeks. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let me see about our first story here. This is from La Jornada translated. Tariff package seeks to protect 350,000 jobs and ensure a level playing field, says Economy Minister Marcelo Ebrard. That was during Monday's Mañanera. I want to put this other headline up here as well from the Wall Street Journal, which this has been kind of the focus of the English language press, although here in Mexico it's been about jobs and what is the actual impact. This one is very much representative of what the English language media has been saying, which is Mexico slaps up to 50% tariffs on Chinese goods, drawing outcry from Beijing. Lawmakers passed levies targeting countries that Mexico has no trade agreement with, including China. It's funny how the deck kind of shatters the impact of the headline. Yeah. But there you have it. Okay. So where should we start here? Let's go ahead and talk about what the government line has been. What is their case that's being made? And then, to his credit, Kurt and I watched the Mañanera this again before starting the program here. He makes a good case. It makes a compelling case. And it's basically, as the headline says, that this is a move not necessarily against any country. And it should be said that unlike Trump's tariffs, these are not across the board applied to one country or even an industry, but it's actually goods within specific industries, with the aim explicitly of protecting 350,000 jobs. So why do they make that case? I want to throw this up here. This is a graphic that was shared during this morning's press conference, that if the tariff package was not implemented as it has been proposed, that Mexico, within a very short period of time, would lose 350,000 jobs, particularly in the auto industry above all. And you can see
all the big three right there, right?
That's right. Stellantis, Ford, GM.
And Stellantis.
And we were talking actually on the way here, the BYD cars, they're really cute. They're very nice vehicles. The Dolphin Mini is a nice car. It's actually really affordable for a middle-class person, obviously not working-class people. But if you wanted one, you better get it before these tariffs come in.
Snap it up.
And here's the long and short of it, which is that basically the North American auto industry cannot compete with China.
Well, that's
They're cheaper and better cars.
That's it.
Yeah.
You just said it. The North American auto industry, into which Mexico is heavily integrated,
big time,
like no other industry, heavily integrated, cannot compete with better and cheaper Chinese cars. So the line out of Abrar is basically that it's unfair competition because they're doing it below market rates or standard rates, right? It's kind of dumping. You can make that case in other areas with which the tariffs are being put on, but not cars.
Yeah.
Not cars. Here are the areas that the tariffs, they've already been approved with Mexican Congress, so it's a fait accompli.
Mm-hmm.
Auto parts, light cars, clothing, plastics, cirúrgico, how would we translate?
Metalworks.
Metalworks, right? That's a good translation. Electrodomestics, toys, textiles, furniture, footwear, marroquinería, right? Paper and cardboard, motorcycles, aluminum remolques, which would be kind of like trailers.
True. Yeah.
Vidrio, glass, and then soaps, perfumes, and cosmetics. So let's parse this a little bit. One can understand tariffs in areas in which, Mexican producers with great difficulty can compete with massive Chinese production.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about textiles, we're talking about footwear, we're talking about areas that have, very much,
And on footwear, actually, it's not just China, but actually a lot of Southeast Asian countries.
of course,
Yeah.
where we're talking about smaller Mexican industries, competing against these behemoths. One can understand that. Let us not forget that, the global north, especially Great Britain and the United States, industrialized in the 19th century behind tariff barriers, right? They protected their industries, and then once they were established, then started, propagating free trade because it was convenient to them. It was convenient for them to be protectionist at a certain time, and then it was convenient for them to be free traders.
Now they have their own industries now
Yeah.
that they can export to, and they
Right.
don't need for those protectionist measures anymore.
So that said, one can understand a degree of protecting areas in which it's hard to compete at that kind of scale, right? One can also understand the desire to protect areas that are important in industrializing Mexico and substituting imports, which is very much a part of the Mexico plan.
That's right.
Right.
Plan Mexico.
The
Yes.
Plan Mexico. Mexico wants to get to a point where it has its own supply chains, its own supply lines, and a substitution of imports. So it's not just a question of, opening the door to anyone and everyone. The problem is, of course, it's not protectionism for the world. It's reinforcing Fortress America, right?
That's right.
And it increases the integration of Mexico into the United States, right? And this has basically been the argument Sheinbaum has been making to the United States, right? Which is basically turning the imperial enemy into your indispensable trade partner. Right?
Which reduces their ability to interfere, and to undermine. and to-
correspondingly. Right?
Exactly.
So that much we can understand. And of course, we support the goals of the Plan Mexico.
And,
right?
and the case was made in the Mañanera that these are linked, that it's not just tariffs and then Plan Mexico, but actually Plan Mexico is designed to build these development poles, to build up the capacity for national industry to produce more.
Yeah.
And using these window of opportunity that these tariffs will allow for these to kind of rise up, because then they won't be facing this stiff competition from cheap Chinese and other countries' imports.
All right. All of that is well and good. But if we go back to the map that you just put up, José Luis,
Let's look at it.
here's where you see the other side of this. And the other side of this is that basically Mexican tariffs are protecting U.S. multinationals, not the Mexican footwear producer or the Mexican textile producer. It's protecting Ford, Stellantis, General Motors, and then other companies like Flexi and Softis and such. One understands that a lot of Mexicans are employed at these companies, right? But it's still a question of protectionism to keep it is China out of the North American car market. It is that.
It's what it is.
It is that. And you can't get around that by simply saying that it's not directed at China individually, and it's not only about automotives, but about these 17 different areas, and it's about specific products within these areas. All right. But, it's staring you right in the face here. And when it becomes a question of raising prices on the Mexican car consumer to protect an inefficient North American car industry, well, then it's a whole different story, isn't it? Mm-hmm. People like BYDs and they like buying cheap BYDs. And actually, it's pretty good to have electric cars in a world that's going that way. Mm-hmm. So that's...
BYDs aren't made here. Mm-hmm. BYDs do not generate that kind of well-paying jobs that the auto industry does. It generates dealerships. And imports and middlemen. But those aren't the kind of jobs you want.
But, sir, BYD wanted to put a plant here and weren't allowed to. So this is when you get to the catch-22 of this issue. Because what Abrar was saying here today was, if an automotive country or whatever wants to, onshore its production here into Mexico, and there can be an abatement of tariffs and such. But when BYD tried to do that, they weren't allowed to. So you can't really say we want to encourage automakers or whomever to bring their production to Mexico and then not allow them to do that. Yeah. This is the problem.
Yeah, to be fair, BYD said that it really didn't move that far on that plan to build a plant here.
I think they were going pretty well along.
But ultimately, they made the decision, for whatever reason it was, to not continue with that plan. But neither did Tesla, which also made a whole lot of fanfare about the cars they were going to be near.
It did. So, but there was a degree of diffidence about the Mexican
We're betting on a North American auto market that is not in great shape.
Yeah.
So how long can this really last? Okay, you'll protect 350,000 jobs.
Yes.
Let's assume half of those are auto industry, right? For how long?
Yep. Yeah, and one absolutely understands that part. But it's the same question of you're yoking yourselves to the big three, right? Like the big three in the late 70s that were very inefficient and then required a bailout. And how many bailouts have they been through?
Had to come and teach them how to do
the
more
whole
efficient
Ayacoca
production.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that you're yoking yourselves to that. But you're also kind of reinforcing a model of, again, is the Plan Mexico about protecting U.S. automakers? Is that what the Plan Mexico is about? And this is part of the critique that we've had. The Plan Mexico should and is supposed to be about, using some, foreign and direct investment as anchor industries to create supply lines, but not to penalize the Mexican consumer to protect U.S. industries. That's the question here. And it's a fine line.
Yeah.
It's hard.
That's the hard part.
It's hard part because, there's a lot of people in these jobs.
So here's my concern around the tariffs. I actually think that using tariffs for protectionist ends makes sense. Yeah. That's why they're there. That's really their use, not what Trump's been doing with tariffs, but to actually
genuinely promote
national development and domestic production and all the rest of it. But it does run into contradiction with the following. And this is something that I learned from our time with the delinking event that
delinking event. Yeah, that was good.
Which is that one of the great advantages of China being able to develop its productive capacity to the degree that it has is that now you have an alternative. Mm-hmm. You don't have to buy specifically from U.S. industry or Canadian industry or Western Europe.
That's where you want to get to.
But you have innovative, more affordable industry out of China that it also isn't necessarily conditioned to you having to subscribe to the U.S. designs on what they want for the world, on their hegemonic intentions. It's actually just, okay, we'll buy this, we'll sell this, we'll buy this. And speaking of which, one of the points that was made was precisely around the trade imbalance that does exist with most Asian markets between Mexico.
10 to 1 with the Asian market. Japan, separate. Right?
But here's the thing, right? If you want to develop industry that basically, as I've talked about before, machines that make machines, not just machines that make other consumer goods, then really you want to keep the door open to China. Yeah. Because it's going to be more accessible, more affordable, less conditioned.
Less conditioned is the key. How much does the U.S. condition? And we're going to be talking about a lot about the free trade revision now and how much more they're conditioning and will be conditioning. What everyone has to say about China, they don't condition that way. They don't.
And there is an understanding in this government that you don't really want to rely put all your trust in the sharing of intellectual property by the United States, because we've seen them close the door to that to China, precisely saying you can't buy our chips anymore. What if they say the same thing to us?
Yeah. How about that?
And that's why you've seen the development of the supercomputer, for example, or this effort to build a kind of a tech hub where we can develop our own systems and chips and silicon and all the rest of it that is necessary for this 21st century economy.
Yeah. And to be perfectly frank, even if the Plan Mexico goes turbo in the next few years, there's just things that they're not going to be able to get to be able to produce in Mexico in the next 5 years or even in 10 years. Not yet. A lot of things, yes, but certain things, no. And a lot of the things that are no do come from China. And, Abroad did speak to that today when he was saying that they talked with industry and they made a whole number of exemptions in comparison to the original plan based on things that Mexican producers fear that they wouldn't be able to replace or substitute.
That's right.
In the short to medium term.
That's right.
So they really tried to fine tune and kind of micro hone the tariffs, right? To that extent, yes.
They claim there won't be an inflationary effect.
Well, that's another thing, right?
That's a little bit harder to believe. I do think
Abroad kind of tried to sell people a line saying because they have big stock and they want to be able to compete, that they're basically going to swallow the price and swallow the tariff and not raise prices that much. I think that's a bit of wishful thinking.
It's a bit of a wishful thinking. And even if we accept it as true, eventually that reserve runs out. And then what happens?
And, we saw it with the U.S. tariffs, right? In the first few months, companies did eat the tariffs, but that doesn't last forever. And that's being seen now in the U.S. And
exactly.
And so there's a degree that the Mexican government will get some revenue out of this, but the revenue, of course, has to be balanced by the price increases. Right? One has to see. Yeah.
This is a tricky one.
It's a tricky one.
Feel free to comment.
That's what I said. We're trying to be, as down the line and objective as possible on this and try to see that from as many different angles as possible, because Mexico needs to protect certain sectors in order to industrialize.
Yeah. But it
has to.
But it can't industrialize if you're closing the door to people who can give you the materials. And the finished products that you need.
And if you're yoking yourself to the one imperial power that has historically devoted itself to making sure that you don't industrialize.
Of course.
So there's that too, What do you do?
What do you do? But while we're on the topic of leaving your comments, please, we love it if you disagree, if there's something we missed there. I know there was an interesting exchange on social media that you had mentioned, Kurt, where somebody was making the case that this is a bad idea, but saying that, well, do we really want to just be importing things? Because it is effectively still importing things.
Still importing things. It's just depending on another, right?
Yeah.
Another source of imports.
And before we move on to our next topic here, I did actually want to mention, we had a friend of ours, friend of the show, a supporter, reach out to us about some of the things that we had to say during the last show around the labor law. And I saw a comment as well that mentioned this, that in comparison to the United States, that even if it isn't exactly what the social movements and the organized working class was asking for here in Mexico, boy, is it miles ahead of what you have in the United States, where there's basically no federal regulation around overtime, around pay, around minimum hours worked, all the rest of it. So we want to acknowledge that. And I think it's actually a really good point.
It's our friend José Hermosillo, who of course is, an expert, works in the sector and
trade union movement,
and trade union movement in California. And he was saying in California, right, you get time and a half after 8 hours a day and double time after the 12th hour. But in many states, you only get the time and a half, and almost never the double pay. Only if the total hours worked in a week exceeds 40, and basically triple pay is unheard of. Right here, it's going to be 40 hours, and then the 12 possible hours of double time, and then the 4 triple time hours. So he's saying triple time is unheard of in the States, and also that there's no upper limit in the United States. They can have you work as much as you want.
Which often does happen.
Right? So just to have that in perspective as well, right? And also there's, this part I didn't know, almost a quarter of the U.S. workforce is not covered by the overtime law at all. Right? Almost a quarter of the total workforce.
That's right, like agricultural workers. Are
Tens of
exempt
millions of
yeah.
salaried workers who make over a certain amount or in management and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. So there you go. Just to show that we do appreciate your comments, and we're more than happy to share them.
Yeah.
with everybody else here. Thanks for that info. All right, moving on to our next topic here. Let's talk about Trump brands fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction and drug war escalation. And I picked this headline in particular because
Isn't this just a showy comment, Jose Luis, or is there something more to it?
Well, that's just it. I think there actually is something more to it.
Go for it.
I think given the fact that we have been watching this administration use every excuse possible to engage in illegal actions contrary to international law, now flirting with crimes against humanity with this de facto blockade that they seem to be wanting to impose on Venezuela, which will guarantee more suffering and an economic crisis in that country, that branding fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, in sort of more specific terms, what it does is allow the military, the Pentagon, to be more involved with the actual interdiction of these substances and their precursors. So that means that it's yet another legal justification that they could employ, not just against Venezuela, because Venezuela does not produce fentanyl, but Mexico does.
However much U.S. media tries to make that case, and they're exporting fentanyl to Hamas and Hezbollah, or I don't know what the hell they've been saying. Right?
Yeah. And I want to bring this quote up here from Politico. It says, the timing of the designation is striking. As speculation mounts that the U.S. will carry out land strikes against alleged drug trafficking targets on Venezuelan soil as part of its pressure campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, declaring fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction would give the U.S. additional legal justification to use military force against Venezuela.
So it's another tool in the aggression toolkit, just like the FTO designation for the cartels. Is that how you see it?
That's an excellent way to sum it up. Yeah. Now, that piece says Venezuela, and obviously everyone's talking about Venezuela. But we have to remember that Trump still is looking for the excuse to conduct strikes within Mexican territory. That he hasn't is a credit to Claudia Sheinbaum and her determination to protect Mexican sovereignty. But that doesn't change the fact that Trump wants to do it. And as you recall, at one moment, the United States legal apparatus, right, the office of whatever it's called, said that they don't have the legal justification for land strikes yet. And that they were only able to do it in international waters. How do we not know that this was the missing piece?
This is the missing piece, maybe.
And we know that they're going to try to do it against Venezuela first. And if they don't get enough pushback, they get away with it, we'll do it in Colombia. And then what's next? Guess where? Mexico.
It's going to be a very busy and active and troubling and interesting 2026, people. And we'll get to that in the next section in a minute.
So where does that leave us in terms of the bilateral relationship? What is this going to have a consequence? Is this something that comes up in these tables that the Mexican government and the U.S. government have? Because once again, it appears to be a unilateral action that could have serious repercussions for this country. Now, do you think it's just kind of bluster for domestic audiences? Or do you think that there's going to be real consequence to this?
I think there's always an element of bluster with Trump, right? He loves to draw attention to himself and make his Oval Office announcements and such as go. So there's a degree of red meat to it. There absolutely is. But I think you're right. I think there's something else to it here, right? And the FTO designation is, along that road to try to edge the legal argument forward to be able to make those strikes, and this would appear to be another thing in that direction. All right, is Trump all that concerned about legal niceties? No, but look at the blowback they're getting about the double tap strike in September with Hegseth and the blowing up of the boats in the Caribbean. Right, so they want to get some pretended semblance of ducks in order with regards to this, right? To be able to make, a far-fetched and false, but, the U.S. corporate media is so credulous and so, co-opted and so willing to swallow any ridiculous argument by the administration that, they'll buy it.
Sure. And they'll sell it to the
And
U.S.
they'll
public.
sell it to the U.S. public, and they'll try to sell
As
it
legitimate.
internationally.
And it's really good you mentioned that, because I think that I do think that this is where it's headed,
Yeah.
which is to try to lay the groundwork in an eventual act of war against Mexico by striking unilaterally that no, it's legal, as they have done. And we'll look at that later on in the show in the case of these attacks against boats and potentially against Venezuelan territory specifically.
Yeah. Now, of course, one can't help be blindingly aware of the historical irony of trying to make the WMD argument to attack Mexico or wherever, considering the WMD argument was the biggest failure, lie, disaster, debacle of U.S. foreign policy barely 20 years ago. And they think that the U.S. public is that dumb that they can not only recycle an argument, but recycle an argument that was
Thoroughly debunked
at the time.
Yeah.
And with the same exact terminology. They're not even pretending to make something else up. They're using a thoroughly debunked argument at the time that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which it did not, right? Leading to the invasion and the, deaths of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and the devastation of the country and how many other countries. So it's brazen to the point of, utter cynicism. But that's the term they're bringing back, WMD. That term of all of them.
It's a good thing Jon Stewart is back on The Daily Show, because he could have a field day with it.
Well, he's been comparing the arguments of invading Iraq with Venezuela. Right?
Yeah. And of course, kind of falling into typical liberal tropes, unfortunately.
Typical liberal stuff.
Yeah. So that'll be something else to watch out for in the coming year, which brings me to our next topic, which is a look forward to 2026. But to start off, we want to bring this up out of the studio into the streets. We want to do more work on the streets, bringing you reports from Mexico City and beyond.
Yeah.
About Mexico, important things. For example, I just saw this weekend that Claudia Sheinbaum was restoring the title to indigenous communities over their territories.
Yeah, that
would have been a cool story to follow up.
Yeah.
It'd be very interesting to go to some of these areas and talk to them. But to do that, we need a little bit of support. So we're asking you to give a donation if you can. In that case, and again, I always insist on this, that none of this is for us, that we are not looking to line our pockets with this, but actually to hire somebody else and to buy the gear that we need to be able to do this kind of reporting. That report that we did from that one protest was with borrowed equipment. So, it'd be nice to be able to kind of just have it here in the studio and be able to grab it and go and do this reporting. So we want to bring that up at the very beginning of this segment. But Kurt, what else do you think we have to look forward to?
Yeah, thanks. We've talked a lot about the really in-your-face threats that Mexico and the region and Latin America and the Caribbean face in 2026. And that is the invasion threat and the drone bombing threat and Trump seizing the oil tanker and bombing boats. We've also talked about the preventative frauds, which is now becoming a habit in Argentina with the legislative elections, and Honduras with releasing Juan Orlando Hernandez. They didn't do it in Chile because they didn't need to. They had the result they wanted, right? Trying to intervene in the sentencing of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, slapping sanctions on the judge, which actually I saw that they were removed. They were lifted. So, some pushback from Brazil there, right? Uribe in Colombia, and that, unfortunately, conviction has been overturned. So all of the meddling, all of the threats, all of the preventative frauds, as if that weren't enough to be watching in 2026, there's a list of what I call ancillary threats. Mm. That's a section in my new Jacobin piece coming out, right?
Ooh, are we getting a sneak preview?
We're getting a little bit of a sneak preview.
Nice. See?
A little bit. I mean, see, this is what you get. This is what you get here.
Like and subscribe if you haven't.
Yeah.
You can get sneak peeks.
Get some of that, So here's some of the ancillary threats, because, the in-your-face threats have a whole penumbra of ancillary threats, right? That's important to go over. So first point, right, as the U.S. is looking at a possible tariff-fueled recession, we see numbers are not looking great in the U.S. labor-wise, and, uptick in inflation because of the, obviously the tariffs and consumer confidence and people feeling that prices are up across the board and, some not good indicators in the U.S. That Trump's economic fuckery could tip over into Mexico,
Right.
limiting Sheinbaum's fiscal room for maneuver, right? We talked about the Plan Mexico, right? Just in the first section of this program, also her ambitious domestic agenda. But by 2026, not everything in the Plan Mexico will be in place yet with regards to, import substitution and domestic production and supply lines and all that stuff. It's going to take time, right? So if the U.S. were to tip over into recession next year, and Mexico is still very heavily dependent on exports to the United States, and how resilient will Mexico be in the face of a potential Trump-fueled recession? That's the first point, right?
Yeah. Before you move on to your next one, it's important to remember that there's not a lot of fiscal space to work with here with the Mexican government.
Yeah.
So a recession in the U.S. could impact revenues here, which pays for social programs, Plan Mexico, these investments, infrastructure, all the rest of it. And that could have a cascading effect because part of the strategy of Sheinbaum is precisely around state-led development.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the resources to do it,
to lead,
then you're in trouble.
Economic growth in Mexico has been there, but low. Sheinbaum has been really good, as AMLO was before, at increasing tax receipts without raising taxes.
Right.
Tax receipts are up. The money is there for this year, but as you say, it's, there's not a lot of breathing room there. And this is why, we see a lot of in, parts of the federal government, they're still, tightening the belt.
Yeah.
Almost as if they were trying to create a cushion for a possible,
that's interesting. I actually had
Trump.
That might be it.
Trump-fueled event from the U.S. Right. So secondly, and even without a recession, Trump's turning of screws and, all the areas we've talked about in the show over the course of the year, from water rights to abuses against Mexican migrants to the New World screw worm that has halted cattle imports, all of that risk draining attention away from our domestic priorities, right? How much has Sheinbaum had to pay attention to Trump in foreign affairs this year, which he's really wanted to, and she's done both. But that could increase next year, especially in the context of the USMCA trade agreement renewal negotiations, in which the U.S. is reportedly demanding basically the whole hog with regards to wiping away regulations and opening up sectors like energy, to vetoing foreign investments, to, all of this.
Yeah.
Right? When one might see these new tariffs, in that context as well. So obviously one doesn't want to be distracted from building out, right, the second floor, the fourth transformation, right? It's almost like just the constant effing threats from Trump. Just a little...
And they're not going to cease.
They're not going to cease.
In fact, it's going to be a very complicated year because 2026 is when the revision, some call renegotiation, of the USMCA is going to take place.
Right.
And that's really going to be where the pressure is going to come from.
Yeah. We'll have to do a special thing on that.
I think so. And we probably should get some of our economist friends to come visit us and give us their breakdown.
That'd be great.
Because I do think that's going to be the major thing. And it's going to dominate the first half of the year because that's when the talks are happening.
That's when the talks are happening.
And then the second half, because that's where the fallout of whatever happens is
will
going
it
to
continue?
be felt.
Will it not? Will there be bilateral agreements like Trump wanted to do in Trump 1? Will he ask for finally too much for the patience of Mexico? Mm-hmm. Third point, right? A U.S. attack on Venezuela or Trump-induced instability in Honduras. There's still no election result there. All that could send waves of migrants northward. And with the U.S. increasingly militarizing its border, the risk that these waves could get stuck, in quotes, right? Because we're talking about human beings. We're not talking about moving parts, but you know what I mean. Or lead to a corresponding crackdown in Mexico's own southern border. We know the history of treatment of migrants in Mexico. Right? Continued abuses against people of Mexican descent by ICE and the Border Patrol constitute another open flank on the migrants' rights front. So, the U.S. just wants to, bombs away LeMay, but it's Mexico that would have to be on the front lines of receiving the migrant waves that would be fleeing from either the instability or the election meddling or the attacks or the drone bombs or a combination of those things and head northward hit the U.S. border, and Trump's like, you deal with them.
Yeah.
And if you don't, X, Y, Z consequence, and the whole cycle starts over again.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
I mean, not to bum everybody out.
Yeah.
But, when we think about 2026, we may be talking about having to organize a response to refugees fleeing from war.
Yeah.
Created by the United States. A war started by the United States against the people that simply want to live their own way, choose their own path.
That's it.
That's wild.
Because the U.S. never wants to deal with the direct fallout of all of these interventions. Yeah, they just criticize migrants as if they were totally divorced from all this that we've been talking about.
Yeah, like that old slogan. We're here because you were there first.
Yeah. Fourth point. The election of more far-right leaders in the region, like Cast in Chile just a couple days ago, right? Either legitimately, Cast won the election in Chile.
Sure.
He did, because of, Boric's awful government. Or through the preventative frauds that we've seen, could isolate Mexico diplomatically and hamper efforts to craft the pan-Latin American response to the Trump corollary that is so urgently needed. How are you going to create a regional response to the Trump corollary with Cast and Milei and whoever winds up in Honduras and the new Bolivian government? That's why Trump is doing this. And these apparent victories by Trump, which vindicates his meddling, could embolden the administration to be even more brazen in supporting the Mexican far right, including further destabilization attempts like the 15N March, the AstroTurf March. The idea would not be to win immediately, but to wear the Sheinbaum administration down over time.
You know what? I'm going to give our viewers a little sneak preview as well. This is from my column coming out.
Oh, great.
For the Mexico Solidarity
You see what you get here? You see what you get? My God. My God. Yeah.
Always tune in. Never miss an episode.
No.
Let me just read a little bit from it because it's very much along those lines.
Yes.
There's no more room for interpretation. A recent series of events have confirmed beyond any doubt that the United States has set its sights on Latin America and the Caribbean and intends to dominate the region, crushing any opposition, even by military means. And I'm going to talk about Honduras, which we've talked a lot about here.
Yeah.
I quoted your tweet there about the preventative fraud.
Thank you.
Credit where credit's due. And of course, I can move on to the situation in Venezuela, talking about the piracy on the high seas that they just engaged in, talking about the blockade. But I want to close with this. Washington loves to label countries that defy them as rogue states. But the country posing a threat to its neighbors is the United States, and the danger is rising. The National Security Strategy for 2025, published earlier this month, confirms that the U.S. is indeed pivoting to focus on the so-called Western Hemisphere, a move that I have previously described as a strategic retreat that is aimed at rebuilding their capacity to dispute global hegemony in the face of their peer rival, China. The National Security Strategy, read in tandem with the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, should be understood as a massive threat to the sovereignty of all countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. A rogue state that engages in preemptive electoral frauds and piracy cannot be trusted. Yet the region appears to be woefully unprepared for the coming onslaught. Time is running out to develop a coherent regional response to the threat that the U.S. poses to all of us.
Mm-hmm. Hear, hear.
And that's it.
Mm-hmm. So follow us in 2026 because it's going to be an interesting year, to say the absolute least, but a dangerous one, right? Where, we don't mean to be utter pessimists and, paint the gloom and doom picture, but we also have to be realistic about what's coming in the pike.
Yeah.
Sheinbaum has been, brilliant in handling Trump. The cabeza fria, cool head policy has been effective. And in the case of something like tariffs, kicking the can down the road was exactly the right policy, or the right strategy, rather, because it gave time for the tariffs to take effect in the U.S. and U.S. consumers to begin to feel the effects of the tariffs, which turned public opinion against them. And so you see that Trump has mostly dropped the issue. When at the beginning of the year, tariffs against Mexico was the constant threat, and now it isn't anymore. So that worked. But with the things I mentioned here, like dealing with, a possible U.S. recession, or dealing with, ongoing screw turning, or with, heaven forbid, an attack on a country in Latin America or more far-right leaders, those are things that don't lend themselves to kicking the can down the road.
Correct.
They have to be, faced ideally directly and even more ideally regionally, but that doesn't appear to be in the cards, at least in the short term in Latin America.
No. Now, we still got a little bit of time, and we've kind of made things a little bit grim right here.
Yeah.
What about something positive, Kurt? Something positive you're looking forward to in 2026 here in Mexican politics?
I am always impressed by the vibrancy of the base here. However many marches I've seen in Mexico, going back to the Desafuero and the 2006 electoral fraud and all of the, movement since in 2012 and Yo Soy 132, and, I was there for those. I'm not the spring chicken anymore. I'm still impressed that the movement can turn out 600,000 people on the turn of a dime. Right? That 6th of December march didn't have a lot of lead time to it, like the Tariff march a few months ago. And this movement can turn out hundreds of thousands of people on short notice. And that is the strength of this movement, that they can turn out hundreds of thousands of people to the streets. So, that is talking about the idiot Trump corollary, that's the Mexican corollary of this. That, unlike what Boric did in Chile, and unlike, Argentina and other, each country has their own history. That connection with the street continues. So that's one thing. I'm also excited about the portability of healthcare, which I've mentioned a couple of times already. The fact that, Sheinbaum wants to get to universal healthcare where anyone who has one healthcare system can use the other ones, which will ideally create more uniformity, bring the bottom up, and really get Mexico to universal care right at a time when, people watching us from the US are staring in the face of double or triple premium increases by January if that's not addressed. That's just two things. What makes you look optimistic for 2026?
Well, one of the nice things about having the transition from López Obrador to Sheinbaum is that a lot of the things that were maybe left over can continue. And I think one of the key things that we're seeing it would be around infrastructure projects.
There you go.
Those infrastructure projects are going to start coming online. For example, the train to the new airport is finally going to be ready next year. Early in January.
Thank God.
Yeah. It's a beautiful airport. I finally got to visit it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that with this, it's actually going to.
It's got that great comment about socialism on the wall.
That's right. It does. Hell yeah, it does. Yeah. Where Felipe Ángeles.
Felipe Ángeles, right?
Yeah.
Mexico's socialist general. Yeah.
So, and then that's just one of many, right? The train to Toluca is finally going to make it into Mexico City. Right. So you see the culmination of these
Observatorio, the line 1 of the metro is now open to Observatorio.
That's right.
That's going to be there to meet that train when it gets into the new station.
Yep. And then we're also, speaking of trains, there's also the new interoceanic line. So there's lots of things that are about to be inaugurated.
About to be inaugurated.
And those are the things that are important because you feel that impact. For example, the people who are commuting right now and taking that awful bus that is really expensive for a tiny little distance will now be able to get to the city faster. And, there's kinds of impacts I think are really important.
Real,
and we'll feel them. And we'll
tangible. Yeah. Of course, the rise in the minimum wage for the following year. Another thing we didn't have time to mention today, but we certainly will be talking more about is, the old pajama-bound Attorney General is out the door, Alejandro Gertz Manero. And the new Attorney General is cracking, boy, Ernestina Godoy Ramos.
Yep.
We just saw the rearrest of former Chihuahua Governor Cesar Duarte on corruption charges. He was behind the Operación Zafiro, which was raiding the coffers of state governments governed by the PRI to fund PRI candidates' campaigns. Standard operating procedure in Mexico not so long ago. He's been arrested, and they're reopening the case against María Amparo Cácer, right? Who was a member of Mexicanos contra, or con, la corrupción y la impunidad, who basically been living with a fraudulent pension from Pemex for 20 years, right? Amongst other cases. So it will be exciting to have, together with the judicial reform and, the work with fiscalias, which needs to happen, right? Nice to have an actual operating and functional Attorney General's office in 2026.
I imagine that.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually an outstanding thing for the fourth transformation.
Yeah.
To actually go after these criminals who rob the country. Resources that could have been used for other things like, the universal healthcare. Yeah. So I think it's important. I think it's an important message to send as well to the public that there won't be impunity. That's it.
Thanks for that little positive turn on this.
I felt we needed it.
We needed it. Yeah, very good.
Plus, we had about 5 minutes to fill.
Okay.
All right. Losers and haters. Ready?
Yeah.
Let's get to it. We are picking on the New York Times. U.S. issues new sanctions targeting Maduro's family and the oil sector. The United States is escalating its pressure campaign on Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro after seizing an oil tanker off the coast. Now, seizing is one word.
It is a word. It's a word.
But I do think there's other, more like stealing?
Stealing.
Pirating.
Taking the crew hostage.
I want to read you a little bit from that piece, which says the following. The use of U.S. military and law enforcement forces to seize a foreign oil tanker on the high seas is unusual.
It's unusual. Yeah.
But the skipper, that's the name of the vessel, had been on the radar of the U.S. government for several years as part of a so-called ghost fleet that smuggles black market oil around the world. Venezuela and Iran have each made extensive use of such ships to smuggle oil and evade international sanctions. So there you have it, black and white text, apparently, according to the New York Times and their, rugged reporters. Piracy is actually okay because apparently they're evading international sanctions. Except
that
they're not international sanctions. There's a reason why those of us who follow Venezuelan politics talk about unilateral coercive measures. These are not sanctions. Sanctions can only come from the United Nations Security Council. Those are the only legal international sanctions. This is the U.S. applying its laws extraterritorially. And I want to cite Adam Johnson, who did a great job of pointing out the various examples of this all over U.S. media, basically providing cover for U.S. piracy, trying to suggest that somehow U.S. sanctions equate to international sanctions. So I'll put this up on the screen as I read it to you. There are two significant lies in this paragraph. First off, the Venezuelan oil in question was not black market oil, and relatedly, Venezuelan oil is not subject to international sanctions. It is only subject to U.S. sanctions and U.S. secondary sanctions, which are sanctions the U.S. imposes on countries that trade Venezuelan oil, but are not themselves sanctions on Venezuela from the countries themselves. Venezuelan oil exports are only black market to one out of the 193 UN member states, the United States. Correct. Actually, not even the European Union goes as far. They only target individuals. To be clear, other countries other than the US, namely EU countries, have imposed light sanctions on specific Venezuelan officials, but not oil exports. The only country that has done this is the United States. And yet, if you read that article, you would think that Venezuela was engaging in subterfuge and ghost market ships to evade international sanctions, which does not have a drop of truth to it. Does Venezuela sometimes hide its GPS locations? Does it send oil to Cuba and South Asian market? Yes. Because they're trying to evade your illegal unilateral coercive measures. And they have every right to, because they are a sovereign state dealing with another sovereign state. Why do we bring it up here? Because guess who else sells oil to Cuba? Mexico.
At a discount price.
So is the US going to seize one of our tankers now? Because according to their logic, they could. Because we're helping them evade sanctions.
By this exact same logic.
We actually have to use one ship in particular for that trade. Because if we use a different one that's been in a US port, it won't be allowed back.
Right.
So is that evading international sanctions according to the New York Times? Seems like it would be. But it's a load of shit. It's just the effort to manufacture consent. The US did was piracy. You cannot impose a blockade like this unless you're at war. Is the United States at war with Venezuela? Because I haven't seen a war declaration from Congress, which is the only body that is actually constitutionally allowed to declare war. Did the UN Security Council approve a blockade of Venezuela?
No, sir.
No. And yet we are being told that this is legal. It's not. Flat out. It is not legal what the United States did. It's piracy. It's not rhetorical. I saw a quote like that. Oh, it's probably just rhetorical flourish from Maduro. No, it's not. It's piracy.
It is piracy.
And then they make these stupid action movies out of it. Have you seen this clip of the one that they recorded?
Yes.
About the brave soldiers. Not the one that was released on social media. They made us another one to make them seem like a bunch of G.I. Joe heroes going and stealing the oil from a country that has suffered repeated attempts at regime change to another country that has suffered even more attempts at regime change. This is the world we live in.
And, another tweet from Adam Johnson, who, as you say, has been great on this. He's begging journalists to do their job and ask basic questions deeper than, well, the State Department from both parties said so. Doesn't matter that both the Biden and the Trump administrations are saying the same thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make that legal under international law, and you should know that.
It's just the bipartisan consensus.
You should know that, actually. That's part of your job as journalist at the New York Times. Adam Johnson, again, pretty sweet deal. The U.S. gets to arbitrarily enforce international laws while hiding behind their vaguely legal authority and moral halo without at all being subject to them and punishing those who vaguely come close to making you subject to them. A real win-win scenario.
Yeah, and that by there, what he's referring to is the fact that the U.S. is not a signatory to the international treaty it is claiming to be enforcing through these actions.
Right.
Just the height of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And unless you watch the show and you read that article, you would think that that was perfectly legal when it's not. There's no basis for it. It's not even a thing in dispute. The only people who think that are people who are deeply embedded with the military-industrial complex in the United States.
And, again, back again to what we're saying, looking ahead to 2026, if the United States is able to get away with it, like they've been able to get away with bombing boats for now, despite the blowback and the double tap, right? If they can get away with stealing an oil tanker and trying to dress it up as a legitimate infringement of international law.
And stealing its contents.
And stealing its content, which it isn't, they will then be emboldened to try the next step, which is drone bombing or an invasion of one or more countries in the region. And this is where everyone who's watching this from the United States or Canada or wherever else, where's the anti-war movement? There have been marches against attacking Venezuela. I'm not saying there haven't. But there needs to be a much better articulated anti-war movement there.
I agree.
Being in the imperial core gives a real responsibility, but also a power there. Anti-war marches in the United States are powerful. And an articulated anti-war movement against this spreading can have a real effect.
The Trump White House right now is terrified of a war powers resolution going against them. It could happen.
So, this has to happen, and it has to come, all the stuff, and all the protests that come from here. But this in particular, this is where the anti-war movement in the U.S. really has to kick in. Right?
That's right. Okay, folks, we made it to the end of another episode and another year.
Another year.
Of Soberanía.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we've been going for 2 years now.
2 years.
Yeah.
Almost 2 full years.
Almost 100 episodes. We'll be getting there. We'll be doing something very special for the 100th episode, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And, like I said, coming up in 2026, we're going to have some great El Taller interviews, right? We're going to finally pin down those people who are, have been just on the verge of coming in. And we'll get them. We will. We'll finish it. We'll cross that finish line. And also want to get out more into the streets and really, we got some good response to the Latin American roundup, but we also got other responses that, but Mexico's so important, so we don't want you taking away from the Mexico time. So we want to find a space somehow to do more of Latin America. We could explain more what happened in Chile. So there is stuff coming up for next year. So
we're excied about it.
We are.
I really am. We're maybe a little tired today, but promise you.
We're dragging a little bit, but we're happy. And we're very appreciative of your support. Enjoy your holidays if you celebrate, or if you don't, do something over these last few weeks. Watch again. If you didn't see the live stream, because it was at, Monday at noon. They'll be coming up the next 2 Wednesdays, and that will get you all ready and full of what you need to know for the first episode in 2026.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you in 2026.
Recordamos a esos políticos hipócritas e irresponsables que México es un país independiente y libre, no una colonia ni un protectorado de Estados Unidos.